Okay, so I'd like to introduce the next speaker. Okay, Gary Turner.
And
Okay.
I don't have a bio in there.
Oh, Gary doesn't have a bio, but he's terrific.
Thank you, Bonnie. That was great. So I'm just going to ask for a show of hands. How many Canadians are in the room? Oh, well done. Covers two of us, so that's good. So I am from Canada. My name is Gary Turner, and I'm a psychologist, a clinical neuropsychologist, and a researcher in brain structure and function from York University in Toronto. So I come down, and just in case anyone was wondering, when I left on Wednesday morning, it was 20 degrees. So I'm very happy to be here. And I'm also happy to present some of our research. And when I say our research, it really is a collaborative effort among all the team members. I'm going to present work from myself and work that I do a lot with Dr. Nathan Spreng, who's up on the panel here. And you'll hear more about his research. I'm going to do the opening part, and then Nathan will kind of bring it home from there. So that's how it's going to work for our presentation. So what's really great about my role in this presentation is I get to talk about some good news in aging. So we all kind of, we're always looking for good news, and I'm going to show you some things that I think it's the way we're starting to think about aging, and then think about the good news in terms of the overall topic that we're talking about here, which is financial exploitation and vulnerability. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we know about the aging brain and about aging cognition. And we're going to talk a little bit, and more so with Dr. Spreng's presentation on social and emotional functioning. And then we'll tie it all together and kind of come back to how this relates to financial exploitation and vulnerability. So the good news is I'm going to be the shortest presenter, not in stature, but I'm going to actually have the shortest presentation because I'm only going to show you two graphs. And I know you've all been waiting after lunch for a graph. So I'm going to give you two of them. And it's actually just going to really be the story of aging as we think about it and why we think that's important in an exploitation context. And then we're going to kind of go into the brain piece with Dr. Spreng. So whenever I talk about aging and aging cognition, I show this slide. And this slide is from a really fantastic researcher now at the University of Texas at Dallas, and it's Denise Park. And she did work over the last several decades mapping out how cognition changes as we get older. And if I asked everyone in the room and probably anyone on the streets outside, when you think about getting older in cognition, you follow the blue line. And so this is age across here, and this would be performance. So what happens? You say cognition declines with age. Everyone would say that. It's just kind of, even in our field, everyone would say that. You kind of, when you talk about cognitive aging, it's like a straight line down. And in some ways, in many ways, there is some truth to that. These are real data plotted out, and essentially, you're going to now, I'm going to draw your attention to the two color schemes up here. So the blue colors are really those aspects of cognition that we do know decline with over time. So that would be things that you'd be thinking about already. That would be memory functioning. Memory does go down. Certain types of memory do decline with age. So that's not, so I'm starting with the bad news part of the story, and now I'm going to come back to the better news part of the story. There are also things like cognitive control and executive functioning that was mentioned earlier, kind of those prefrontal cortical regions, the frontal lobes of the brain do. Those things do tend to decline as you get older. So there is some truth, that idea of aging cognition. There's a bit of a decline story here. So we don't back away from that. There's truth behind that. But I think what's more as interesting, maybe I won't say more interesting, but as interesting are the warm colors here. And what those represent is your knowledge and your experience and the things that you gain over life that become crystallized in your neural architecture, in your cognitive structures. It's that kind of world knowledge, your knowledge about yourself and the world around you that continues to improve as you get older. And more people are starting to think about these two aspects of cognition with age because they're both very important, right? So the idea of actually having knowledge and then working with knowledge, you kind of need both, right? And so as you get older, you're gaining knowledge, you're gaining life experience. Sometimes Dr. Spreng and I will talk about wisdom, kind of an aspect of aging that we're very interested in. So it's that idea of building up a repertoire of your knowledge and life experience that is actually can convey benefit for an aging adult. So if I tested older adults and younger adults on vocabulary, lots of time we measure, it's a very crude measure, we're kind of still figuring out how to measure this life experience component, but many times we measure it through vocabulary, your knowledge of words and meanings. So the research will show you that younger adults perform more poorly than older adults. So older adults are actually doing better on things like vocabulary. So we do know, and it makes logical sense, that of course, as you go through life, you're going to gain your experiences and your knowledge. But as aging researchers, we hardly thought about that idea, that aging is not this, aging is two things that are going on. So why is that important? So I'm going to show you another graph. This is my second graph and my last graph of the day. And I'm sorry it's a little bit dull here, but I'll walk you through it. But it's essentially showing you the same thing, okay? So what's the bonus here is that I'm giving you two graphs, but they're showing the same thing, okay? There's just one extra piece in here. And so this is this world knowledge that's going up. This is your performance, so up is better here. And this would be age, okay? So as you see, knowledge and experience grows as you get older. And then this idea of what we're calling fluid cognition, or those things that you're kind of working with that knowledge, like memory and so on and so forth, do decline. So the red line from the last graph and the blue line. Does everyone follow me on that? Pretty straightforward. But what's really important here, and I should point this out in the context of David's talk earlier. So David, this is from the paper that you mentioned. So it's actually from the paper, it's looking at financial investment and financial investment behavior across the lifespan. So they brought this model into their paper, but you'll see, if you look closely, I'm sorry it's a little faint, but you'll see there's another line that sits right across here. And this is called performance. So as you can see, if you only look at this, as you get older, your fluid cognition goes down. But if you look at this, you have a lot more lived experience now at this point. So your performance on a task or in a real world task, maybe financial management, for example, comes in about here because you're able to draw from a declining resource here, but a growing resource here, okay? And why is that important? So when we look at this fluid abilities going down, for many years, the researchers, there's not a big body of researchers, there are really some leading figures like Daniel Marzin and whatnot have been studying financial vulnerability in older adults for decades now. So there's a body of research, it's not extensive. But if you go back a decade, maybe even less than that, but certainly 2 decades, 1 decade ago, you're going to think about financial exploitation and financial management decline in older adults through lenses like this, your ability to calculate, your ability to balance your checkbook, your ability to kind of plan for the future, to kind of manage your investment. That's kind of the lens that we looked at, and I say we, I'm fairly new in this field, but the people who come before me have really kind of spent a lot of time thinking about these fluid abilities such as this. And that's important. We all need to do that. We all need to kind of make sure our bank accounts are where they should be, our checkbooks are balanced, that everything lines up. So I'm not diminishing the importance of that. However, it does decline, but now when we actually start to think about the other side of the equation, so there's another piece to this, right? So we actually have financial experience. So as you go through life, you're actually growing. Your investment decisions are becoming better. You kind of have a loss one year, so you don't invest that way the next year. And you kind of start to develop these skills, right? That lived experience. And so that continues to improve. So now I'm starting to shift away from this idea of only decline to kind of thinking, but we also have a lot of experience that we can draw on. And older adults absolutely do that. And so if you follow this line here, this performance line, you see this kind of point where it really is at the highest level. I would kind of call that the maximum shrewdness zone, right? So coming back to David's point. So that's that idea where you really have like a really nice supply of that fluid cognitive ability, but you've also gained enough life experience that your performance in financial management is probably peaking. But now here's the good news, right? Look at younger on the performance curve and look at older on the performance curve. Does anyone see any difference? There's no difference, right? So when you think about it, the story is not all bad. So the idea is that and actually some of the work that we're all going to do and we're starting to think about in terms of prevention is drawing upon how we access that lived experience. And actually, Bonnie made a really excellent point. Thinking about that stopping to pause. You're on the phone, you're stressed out, you're under pressure, like some of the scenarios we've heard today already. By stopping and pausing, and this is some of my intervention work that I do, building a pause, taking a breath, allows you to draw on this. Because very often, it's there, the knowledge is there, and Bonnie made that point, absolutely. So the knowledge is sitting there, but boy, do you need to stop and take a breath to bring that to the forefront, right? So then, I think someone else mentioned the spidey senses, right? And it might have been David. So it's actually, you're able to pause and bring that experience to the fore. So that's why I'm saying if there's a good news story in here. So now I'm going to go back to a little bit of the bad news. So, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nathan and run away. So there's a real world component to this, right? And just like I said before, just like we've heard today, in the real world, you're frenzied, you're harried, the whole thing, pausing is always a good idea. So that's the good news. However, where we're going to go from my talk forward now is we're going to start to bring in ideas such as social contact, okay? So when we started, and again, I'm saying we, but when the people who come before me started looking at financial vulnerability, we're looking at this. Now we think that's really only a part of the story. And it's been brought up multiple times throughout the morning that the most exploitation happens within families. Right? I think Bonnie's made that point. It's been made kind of, or known others or close others, right? So now you start to move into this idea of, in the real world, even when you stop, even when you pause, there's an idea that there's social pressure. So now we're starting to understand that exploitation is not, I won't say not, is not entirely this idea of balancing your checkbook. It's actually making financial decisions in the real world when your grandson or granddaughter is looking for that extra cash for whatever. And now you've got that social dynamic that's coming up.